This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret word is roadhouse.
If I take my time.
Salutations, hail and well-met readers and reviewers. Today's guest is C.B. Bernard. C.B. Bernard is a novelist, writer, inveterate storyteller, and occasional boat builder who has moved cross-country 6 times, lived in 9 states, walked tens of thousands of miles with his dogs, and written professionally about everything from fly fishing to wolves to maritime supremacy, or maritime piracy, which might be supremacy, depending on the nature of the piracy. After spending much of his life in Alaska and Oregon, he now lives on the Rhode Island coast with his wife and dog, where he can be found with his feet in the ocean and his head in the clouds. Welcome, Chris. Glad to have you on the show today. So
entirely my pleasure to be here, Ben.
Oh, I am very, very excited. I am excited to get to the book. But before we do, first thing we have to explain to folks listening on the podcast is these costumes. Of course, YouTube viewers can see what we're wearing, and they're going, what in the heck are they wearing? But podcast folks need to know. So tell everybody about that costume.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be on this show. I'm a big fan of yours and the program, so I really wanted to deck myself out. So I chose for tonight to wear a full bear costume inspired by the one Nastasia Kinski wore in the movie The Hotel, New Hampshire.
Perfect. Oh, yeah, it's so great. And I was like, okay, you're going full bear costume. I'm going to go with this rabbit costume, the bunny costume from, Frank the Bunny from Donnie Darko. And then even seeing myself right now on YouTube, it is terrifying. And This episode is coming out on, it's April Fool's Day. And it's episode 69 of the show. And I do not have the maturity to not mention that and, giggle about that. And it just doesn't fit the vibe to be terrifying on April Fool's Day. So if the viewers don't mind, I am taking off this horrifying bunny mask. And we can just be 2 people in these full body. It's going to be a sweaty show, folks. Yes, thank you for going all out there in the bear costume. So jumping right to it, you've got a book coming out. I'm excited to hear about this book.
Yeah, thanks. This is my second novel, appropriately called Ordinary Bear. And it's set in Portland, Oregon, and in the Arctic, both places that are very near and dear to my heart.
And so what is the, not to give too much away, but what's the bear connection there?
Well, it would be difficult to share that without a spoiler.
Okay, so folks are just going to have to grab a copy. And when does it drop?
April 2nd, tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well,
so folks, check it out. And so it's available for pre-order as people are listening. And we'll have links in the show notes. So go down there, click, get your copy. So it's called Ordinary Bear.
Ordinary Bear.
There's Ordinary Bear. We'll say that lots of
times. Bear on the cover and everything.
There's the cover for folks who are watching on YouTube. A novel set in Portland. And so how long was that? I don't want to get too much into process, but folks need to understand a novel is a product of a lot of time and energy. How long have you been working on this one?
It's funny. As you know, writing is a process of procrastination. The novel before this one took 9 years. And then when I put that one in with my agent, when that went out on submission, I started Ordinary Bear, and I wrote Ordinary Bear in about 16 months.
One of those ones that flew.
Yeah. But the first book, before Small Animals, that took, I think, 14 years.
Yeah.
So I'm at an average of 3 books in 25 years or so. It's not a great track record in terms of speed. I was just at a
conference. Jessie Kwok has this phenomenal conference. She just did her first one, the Author Alchemy Summit. And now it'll become annual, I hope, because it was really valuable. But she had a lot of these industry experts, and some of these folks are those folks who put out something, but often it is a novel, like every 2 months, 3 months. And I am just, that is not me. Like, I will never be one of those people who can crank out a book that fast. 16 months would be fast for me. I tend to average about 2 years. But the last one was more than that. So
Well, hold
yeah.
on, talk me through this. What is in that time frame? Break down the percentages of time with first draft, time with edits, time with putting it in a drawer and waiting before you go back and look at it, and time that you should be writing but you're not.
Right. So so within the drafting phase, there's lots of time that I should be writing, but I'm not. And that is about a year, usually. And it fits and starts. I am not as consistent as I would like to be. And I deceive myself into believing that a lot of that is having a day job that is very time consuming. And, oh, if only I were full time, I would be able to write books much faster. One of the things that we heard loud and clear at the at this conference was that is not the case. If you go full time, it can actually have a negative impact on your kind of writing discipline, or it can alter the work. And it was good to hear people say that. Like, once you're saying, if I don't crank this thing out to pay the rent, you're going to write different stuff. And
Yeah.
so that was reassuring to me to go, oh yeah, and I do have a job that I love. So I'm, maybe not going to risk quitting this job that I love so that I can crank out garbage faster. Like, I'm going to write the books that I want to write and take the time. But yeah, it tends to take about a year. And then it's a year of revising, editing, uh, you know, waiting on tenterhooks for those edits to come back from editors, and then publication calendar. And so the only way that I kind of even feel it's every 2 years is when I then look back at the publication dates and go, oh, 2013, 2015, 2007. Oh, there's a pattern here. But each one feels like it's a long process of, getting that into the editor's hands and going through that process. And I've been very lucky for the last couple of books to have a whole bunch of folks help me with the, editors slash beta readers and some sensitivity readers, because I'm writing
Yeah.
characters whose identities are very far from my own, and I want to be thoughtful about the way that I'm doing that. And yeah, it is a really time consuming process. And is yours trad published? Because that slows things down too.
Yeah, it is. The publishing world moves glacially, as you know,
Yes.
but it's also, I like to say, it's a machine engineered to efficiently crush the human soul.
Yeah.
But my publisher, I'm been with them for 2 books. This was 2 book deal, and they've been great to me, and they move as quickly as a traditional publisher can, which is
Right.
not very, but but
We should shout them out since you're saying good things about them. What's the company?
they're Blackstone Publishing. They
Oh yeah,
started
yeah,
out as
yeah,
a yeah, they started out as an audio publisher. They're still
yeah.
one of the biggest audio publishers. They moved into print, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years ago, and they began in a garage, I believe, in Ashland, Oregon.
Yes. And then set up shop in Spokane, I believe, Washington, or at some point, or they were in Washington as
Maybe
well.
they're split between Oregon and New York now.
Yeah. But yeah, Blackstone is, yeah, that's great. That's a get. But I'm glad to hear that they're reasonably fast. I mean, that is one of the big advantages for our authors at NotAPipe Publishing is, when you go for a smaller press, you can go faster. And
Yeah.
we can, if an author says to me, I am comfortable with a 2 month time frame for the, kind of, not the pre-order. We generally do a 1 month pre-order, but for all the sending it out to reviewers and stuff, especially for debut folks where we're probably not going to get a lot of reviews anyway that early on, we can go faster. Whereas a trad house is going to say, no way, with the amount that we are investing, we are going to take 6 months, 9 months, a year of just front end marketing stuff, which is great. Like that's wonderful that they do that. But yeah, it feels very frustratingly slow for the authors often.
I will say one thing I've learned is that they're just people. They're all just like us. They're overworked, they're understaffed, and they love books, and they really want them all to succeed. And my team there has been fantastic. I really feel like they're invested in my success and the success of the book. And when I fall down, it's me, not them.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the challenges that people need to understand is when you're going with a bigger publishing house, everybody in the industry is trying to put out great art and also, keep the lights on. And
Yeah,
if you have a big publishing company with a big office, that's more lights. And so
yeah,
they are having to, keep more people on payroll and that kind of thing. So a lot of those kind of pressures that are, adjacent to, but not necessarily the same as producing high quality art, they're feeling those pressures even more acutely. Whereas we
yeah.
can say, hey, this year we lost money, and that's okay. We put out some beautiful books, and that's satisfying. And they're saying, the publisher at Blackstone can't say, oh, this year we'll just lose some money and fire some people. Like that's people's livelihoods. And so it is, I am totally sympathetic to the fact that they seem to writers like, oh, they're more venal. They're, having to, make sure they hit those targets and that kind of stuff. Well, they have to because there are people they have to keep paid.
Yeah, one of the things I like about small publishers like yourself is you really invest in building a writer's career, like giving them time and runway to find audience and to build audience. And I feel like Blackstone follows that model. It's like the old school model. That's how things used to be done decades ago. A lot of the big houses now, it feels like you get one and done. If you don't break through on your first book, uh, that's it. You're only as good as your next book, I guess. But
Yeah,
Blackstone
for
really
the big
seems
ones. Yeah.
to value their writers in a way that feels small pressy to me, which I appreciate. But Not a Pipe Publishing, lots of small presses in Oregon and elsewhere. It, this country needs more of that. It's getting harder and harder for small presses to thrive and survive. And people like you who put in the work and put out the art, uh, we owe you so much.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad to hear that Blackstone is doing that as well, is really taking care of its people because yeah, I've heard some absolute horror stories from folks who've gone with, the big four and they feel like, okay, but big five, I'm breaking through. I'm with these, massive publishing houses and those companies, again, this is not a knock on them, but they'll say, if your first book is not a mega hit, we're done with you because we need to know that we're going to, that they're taking a big bet.
Yeah.
Whereas we're saying, hey, maybe it wasn't your first book, but hopefully it's your third and hopefully it's your fifth. And I can say to an author, you know, it's okay, take the time to write the next one. This is, I'm not going to be coming back to you and, sending Guido to break your knees if you don't have this thing done by next Tuesday. So
Yeah.
it is a different model that's, about support. But yeah, but that is cool. You've kind of found that happy medium with Blackstone. That's really great that they are because that they're a name that right away I hope folks are recognizing and going, oh, and most people I have to remind myself don't care who published the book. Like that's irrelevant to them. But for those of us in the industry, I'm like, ooh, Blackstone. That's a win.
They give me a lot of input into the cover art. They let me choose the narrator for the audiobooks, and
Oh, that's great.
that alone makes them better than a lot of the traditional publishers that my friends have worked with. And I'm grateful. I'm happy to be a part of the Blackstone family.
Yeah. Well, I am excited about this launch. That's tomorrow. I mean, that's very cool. Now, the other thing that, a lot of non-writers don't understand is, and you've been through this once already, when your first book comes out, you're like, and my life will be different tomorrow. And then it isn't.
Yeah.
Because nobody's read it yet. It will be a process, but it is an exciting. I hope you have a big celebration, at least for yourself planned, take the family out to dinner. Like that's deserved.
We're in that stage now where we're trying to put together a very small localized book tour, doing events, reaching out to media, and it's a weird period, right? Because you can relate to this. That's the period where it's all hope, where
Yes.
it's all potential, and you just have no idea what's going to come. And if you're cruel to yourself, you can allow yourself to daydream about things really finding traction. If you're even crueler to yourself, you don't allow yourself to daydream and you just assume it's going to fall flat. The reality is neither of those things. It's going to be somewhere in the middle in all likelihood. But I've always believed that books have the power to change lives, and each one of mine has changed mine. Uh, Not just the ones I read, obviously, those have changed my life, which is why I became a writer in the first place. But every book I've written and published has changed my life in quantifiable and different ways, from the people it's introduced me to, to the letters I get back from readers, to the places they've taken me, and just to how they've changed me over the course of writing them. It's a gift to be able to do this, and it's a gift to be able to share it with other people.
Yeah, and there's so much that is outside of our control once the book is out there in the world, and it's reminding yourself of the ways that it has changed you. Like that's something that's still more under your power.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's a good way to think of it. You know, I think every day a million books come out in the world. That's not the real number, but that's what it feels like when your book
it's in
comes
like
out.
tens of
And
thousands a year. It's overwhelming. And so it
yeah,
is no surprise that nobody's reading them all. Like you
yeah,
could not,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah. Well, lots of good books in the world, and I think we owe it to ourselves to try and read every single one of them, even if
Yes.
we know we're going to come
Readers, I
out short.
encourage you, read them all. And start with Ordinary Bear, which comes out tomorrow.
That's right.
So you know, we've already verged too close to process. It's a show about procrastination. So, what has been distracting you and keeping you away from your writing in terms of pop culture lately?
Oh man, I my wife and I were in Dublin in November for our 15th anniversary. And
Cool.
Ireland is a great literary country, and Dublin's a great literary town. They have the Museum of Literature there. And just the fact that they have a museum to literature is phenomenal. Uh, while I was there, we visited the museum, and they announced a Booker Prize that went to another Irish writer. They seem to just have a dynasty of winning Booker Prizes now. And I brought home a suitcase full of books by Irish writers, and if I'm being honest, bottles of Irish whiskey, both of which are distracting me lately. I've been in a deep free fall reading Irish novelists, and they make me, I've fallen in love with the language all over again, or with language, I should say. It's not even the same language in some ways, but it's also made me want to quit writing because I can't do the pyrotechnics that some of these novelists are doing. It's astonishing. So that's been a deep distraction for me, both in the existential sense that it makes me want to quit writing and pack it up, and also that I've just been reading so many really good books, and sometimes with day jobs, with family, with everything else, you have limited time in the day. You need to decide, am I going to spend it writing? Am I going to spend it reading?
Yeah.
It's really easy to fall into the reading rabbit hole and lose time to that.
Yeah. Well, and if you are then combining it with the Irish whiskey, if you do the Irish whiskey and the day job at the same time, you get fired. So that's not really an option. If you do the Irish whiskey, yeah, and the reading simultaneously, you can lose something from the reading experience. It can become more challenging, So yeah, that's and with Irish novels, if you do the reading and then do the drinking of the Irish whiskey, it can lead to that existential dread of I will never be able to write as well. So what am I going to do? I'm going to drink more. Yeah. Yeah,
While I was there, so I told you that the Booker was announced, and Paul Lynch, I think it was, there was an editorial or an opinion piece in the Irish Times about the fact that the Irish have been killing it in awards lately. And the reason for that is because they value it as a culture. They teach literature, they fund literature, they fund artists, and it's celebrated all over the city in a way that you just don't see here. And it's paying off for the writers there, and it's paying off for readers everywhere.
yeah,
I know that you teach. I think that we have kind of fallen away from teaching the arts in a way that troubles me. And that's going to come back to bite us in places we don't want to be bitten down the road. Uh,
yeah, it's absolutely a push-pull I feel at work where, folks are saying career technical ed, and I want to hear that, and I want to recognize, yes, we do need plumbers, we need electricians, that is valuable. But the way it infects a language arts class is, you need to be teaching more nonfiction, you need to be teaching how to read all these other kinds of, technical manuals, that kind of thing, which is all valuable. And at the
yeah,
same time, what ends up getting kind of taken away is storytelling, literature. There is trying to convince colleagues, hey, if you teach science, if you teach the trades, you need to be helping me teach how to read the things in your, in your trades. And they're saying, don't take away my time. And I'm saying, but if I'm teaching how to read the stuff that is necessary for yours, you're taking away my time. So
Yeah.
that is there certainly is a tension. I was talking to an education theorist one time who said, we could do a great job with education in this country if we could just figure out what we want, the purpose. Why do we want an educated populace, and what does that mean? And because we can't agree on that, that's where a lot of our education, and so if as a culture we were to say storytelling, like the Irish, storytelling itself is really important to us, I
Yeah.
think then it manifests more in the educational system. And we've just said, maybe somebody will learn storytelling in a marketing class in college. That means somebody who's had a deep history of storytelling as an important part of the culture gets to that 400
Yeah.
level marketing class, and they're already thinking, how can I make a 60-second ad tell a beautiful story?
Funny because as a culture, we do value storytelling in less obvious ways, right? We value it in TV commercials.
Right.
We value it in movies, TV series, obviously, but we seem to have erased or ignored the line between that and storytelling in literature.
Yeah.
And I get it. I absolutely get it. I like TV. I like movies. I like that it's really easy to find a million ways to entertain yourself that weren't available when I was a kid. You can watch any show, any film at any time, anywhere, and that's all great. But it becomes too easy. And even podcasts like this, I love podcasts. I always have headphones in, always listening to news or books or anything. But sometimes I have to remind myself, take out the earbuds and enjoy the silence, allow space for the thinking, for the storytelling to happen in my head, just space to breathe and imagine, because I don't want to lose the ability to entertain myself. I don't want to lose the ability to imagine things, I guess. And I do worry that culturally that's what's happening.
Yeah.
It's too easy to distract ourselves. It's too easy to be entertained. We're losing the ability to just sit with ourselves in the quiet, and uh, that includes reading.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read a lot of folks. There's kind of a recognition in the business world that a lot of great ideas happen to people when they're in the shower. And I think we need to step back and say, why is that? Because it's the one place you don't have your phone. Like,
Yeah.
it's not because there's something magical about the shower. It's because it's one of the own, and some people are even, taking their phones in, listening to music and that kind of thing. And it's like, no, creating that space where it's just silent is, you don't have to have the shower on to do that. You can just have a space of silence. But
You're sure it's not the hot water that's
and yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are other advantages, but I think we should recognize one of them is you don't have a phone in your hand. Like,
yeah. Yeah. I moved to Rhode Island from Oregon 5 years ago, and one of my best friends flew out from Canada. He's a physicist. He flew out to Oregon and made the drive with me. We were towing a boat. We had my dog, and we we both brought a whole bunch of podcasts that we thought we wanted to listen to, and we never turned the radio on
Yeah.
once in like a week and a half. We talked. We sat in silence because we've been friends long enough to be comfortable in each other's company in the silence. But we also played the "Don't Google It" game, where when one of us would say, "Oh, who is the actor that was in that movie, or what was the name of that book, or what's the ingredient in that cocktail, or whatever it was," uh, instead of looking it up, we'd challenge the other person to not look it up and just wait and see when you recalled it. And it was painful for the first few days, and by the end of the trip, I felt like our recall had gotten better. It's maybe it's a muscle, right? And if you don't exercise it, you lose the muscle. It atrophies.
Absolutely. Oh, it absolutely is. I now do pub trivia with a group of friends, and you cannot use your phone. I mean, it's very it wouldn't make any sense if we could all just Google it. And last night there was a movie that was referenced, and I knew I had seen this film in the 80s. It was Empire of the Sun, but during the time we're going through it, I'm going, I think there's something sun related in the title, and I could picture the actors, and I could, I was trying to remember this film, and yeah, being forced to recall it without Googling it was a real challenge. And, at the last minute, somebody else said, oh, I was going through colors and I was like dawn and somebody went sun and then it all kind of came together. But yeah, actually challenging ourselves to, to not export our memory to Google and entrust it all to my drive knows everything and I don't. Like, it's
You ever do
challenging.
that thing where like you find yourself like you're brushing your teeth and you pull out your phone to look at it, like what? Why am I doing this? Why
Yeah.
why am I looking at Twitter or whatever it is? Why am I reading the news while I'm brushing my teeth? Uh, and the world makes it easy to do that, and it makes it tough not to. I mean, you can't even pump gas anymore without looking at
The
screens.
screen, right? Yeah,
You sit in a doctor's waiting room and they have CNN on the TV. If you're lucky, it's CNN.
right.
It's hard to get away from it, and increasingly, I am trying to be proactive about creating silence, shutting down my screens. Everything I need is on the screens for much of the day, but then I shut them down and I realized that everything I need is actually not on those screens. My wife, my dog, my friends, my books, outdoors. That stuff is so important, and my brain thrives the longer I spend away from the screens, and I have to force myself to do that.
Yeah.
And it's a little embarrassing that I've gotten to the point where I have to force myself to do
No,
that.
I think it's, one of the things at this conference, there was a person who was a productivity expert and was one of the things that was tip, kind of a life hack was schedule your social media time into blocks so that you're saying this is the time, and this is particularly important for us as authors where we have to do some social mediaing. And, he was encouraging, set aside an hour and a half. This is your time to do that this week. And connect with people and send your messages and that kind of thing so that you can say, no, and this is not my social mediaing time. And it's not because I acknowledge I'm every, oh, there's a spare second. I'll check what's on Twitter. And that's really unhealthy. So yeah, getting
Yeah.
away from that and saying, how do I turn that off in the non-scheduled times is it's something I acknowledge is not easy.
Now, all that said, I also can distract myself very easily watching Nordic and Scandinavian crime dramas and all sorts of other things. As I get older, exercise becomes more constrained to like the elliptical machine that we have, and I will just pop up a laptop and put on
Yeah.
some show that I have to read the captions on because it's in a language I don't understand, and that is how I keep myself exercising and how I keep myself distracted.
But even that, have you found I'm finding that some of the shows that I engage with best are subtitled because it prevents me from looking at my phone. So I'm having to even hack by saying I need to watch things in a language other than English so that I won't,
Yeah, I mean,
check Twitter in the 2 seconds between two people speaking. Like I don't,
yeah, yeah. When you're looking at one screen and you
yeah,
have another screen going, that's like multi layers of detox that you need.
yeah, yeah. My son, it's amazing to watch him. So this next generation, he can be communicating with his friends on his headphones watching or playing a video game, and he's watching a show on his phone kind of out of the corner of his eye at high speed. So it's on Netflix at, 1.5 or 2.0 so that he can go, oh yeah, I've got the gist of the show. I can now talk about it with my friends. I'm aware of this television program. Well, he's also playing. And I'm sitting there going, that is amazing and also
Yeah,
terrifying.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, and yeah. You mentioned the productivity expert. They keep talking about ways to like disrupt books so that you can inhale the knowledge, you can intake the knowledge faster. And maybe there are certain books that are written specifically with that in mind, but I think when the a big part of the process is the process itself, the getting lost in a book, the stepping away from a screen, the imagining the characters and the settings and filling in the blanks yourself. When that is part of the process, finding a way to remove that process is missing the point.
no, I mean, yeah, I totally agree. One of the things that, we have to think about intensely as we are writing is pacing. how am I going to slow you down when I want you to slow down and speed you up when I want you to speed up? And if you're trying to hack that by going, oh yeah, and I'm going to, listen to the audiobook at 2.4 times speed, you're going to miss out on the fact that we worked really hard to slow this scene down and to complicate the language to make it more dense here because there should be some pathos here, and then speed this action sequence up in with short paragraphs and a lot of dialogue. Like, how am I thinking through that pacing process? That's intentional. And yeah, if somebody else is hacking it, they're not having the reading experience. They're missing
Yeah,
it.
I didn't mean that as a knock on your son. I think it's pretty remarkable that his generation is able to do things like
Yeah,
that. That's just not how my brain works.
no, me neither. I watch it and I'm just like, I can't imagine how to do that. And also, and I've said to him, you didn't really see the show. Like, you are missing out. The director wanted you. There's a reason this scene was slow. And if you speed it up, you're missing something. Intelligent, thoughtful people chose the timing in a certain way for a reason. But
And the director probably didn't intend for you to watch it on a screen this size, right?
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna go see now we're revealing the kind of time traveling we're doing here. I'm gonna go see Dune 2 tomorrow. And I'm very
Oh,
excited
nice.
about that. And Dune, the first film, is intentionally slow at
Yeah.
times. And I know that my son struggled. And that's like, and I'm like, good for the director, Divanu, I think is his name, for slowing, forcing us to wrestle with something that is not, doesn't have to be incredibly fast to then earn the action sequences later. And yeah, so we'll see how that goes. By the time people are listening to this, they're like, yeah, that movie has already come and gone.
Yeah,
But
we're on
I'm
Dune
very
3.
excited about it.
The I mean that's another thing. Movies, and I read recently that the average edit is down to like 5 seconds or less an edit. They just keep
Yep.
cutting.
Yep.
Uh, that's new. It
Right.
used to be that you would have long, loving close-ups on people's faces and on scenery, and you would have long, slow scenes, and maybe too long, maybe too slow. But I think it's gone too far.
Yep.
I,
Our
I, all
attention
right,
span.
I'm dangerously close to sounding like an old fogey climbing
Well,
on
and
a
that's the
soapbox
thing
here,
is,
but
do we just say, this isn't the way it was in my day, and then we're just the old guys, or is it like, no, something genuinely has been lost in, speeding things up? And I think to some extent we can't be the authorities on that. Like, we need somebody
yes,
who's 22 to go, you know what, you're right. Things need to slow down, like, because otherwise it's just us fogies saying it's different.
yeah, that's a good point. Are we catering to people's attention spans getting shorter, or are we creating shorter attention spans? Uh, this is deeper than I am prepared to talk about tonight. I
Yeah,
did
well,
not
and
come here to get
yeah,
this
and it's,
deep
I mean,
into.
and we can't know, and so that's interesting. I mean, I think the long-term question of it is, where does it go from here? Is it infinite? Like, can the attention spans just get shorter forever, or is there going to be some pushback where people are going to start saying, and not just old guys like us, but people are going to start saying, hey, we need to slow down and recognize that there's a real value to silence and thoughtfulness. I don't know.
I
We,
guess we'll
we,
see
we don't
how
know.
Dune 2 does. If
Yeah,
if people
exactly.
say it's too slow, we'll have our answer, right?
Right, right. So uh, in addition to kind of pop culture stuff, what about in the news? What has been drawing you away from your work?
Man, the news is a diaper fire. It it
Yes, it is.
feels like the news is a shepherd tone, the constantly rising tone that never peaks, never crescendos. It just keeps growing. That's what watching the news feels like. Like every story is worse than the one before it, and you keep thinking this can't continue, and it does. And uh, I have friends who are starting to abandon the news, starting to stop watching it because it's too much. We're not meant to mainline. I mean, we're not meant to mainline this. Twitter is a good way to mainline it if you want to, but 24/7 news cycle is another way to mainline it. We're just not. We're not built to handle that. And the unfortunate thing for me is I'm a news junkie. I was a journalist for a big part of my career, and in some ways I still am. And I like to be informed because I think being educated and being informed is critical uh, for so many things. Being a human, being a citizen, you need to be informed. So I can't hide from it. I can't stick my head in the sand. but you need to find ways to take it in measures and to kind of accept what you can't do anything about and find ways to cope with it and seek out the things that you can get involved in to change or to move the needle on, and act on those, because someday when your son asks you, well, when things were happening, what did you do? It's not going to be an acceptable answer to say I complained about it on Twitter.
Right. One, and I talk about this with students too. I mean, the kind of it bleeds, it leads has, is totally appropriate in the world of, yellow journalism newspapers. Like I get, somebody was going to have to be standing out on a street corner shouting that out. But in the world of 24/7 news, it bleeds, it leads skews our perception of the world in this really unhealthy way. My computer is doing something weird. Okay, there we go. And so, when I tell students, fewer people are dying in wars than any time in the last about, a couple thousand years, proportionate to our population. Would you experience that? Would you believe that, having watched the news? Like that, this is a remarkably peaceful time. And that is a kind of shocking idea to them, because there is no news story that says today in Indonesia, there was no war. Today in Japan, there was no war. Like that's not a story, right? And so it skews our perception to go, here's more horror. It's just horror all the time, atrocity all the time. And actually, it's a relatively peaceful time.
When you go into coffee shops, they have sometimes in rural towns, they have like they call it I think it's the good news. It's like a
Oh yeah,
flyer that has local ads on the back and just like little trivia bits and little upbeat stories. I feel like there should be more of that.
yeah.
Every news hour should have some segment of time devoted to just positive, upbeat things, which is maybe
There would be a
naive and
market for it. I think
Pollyanna-ish, but it can't hurt to shine a light on good things and good people for 10 minutes a day.
Yeah, yeah, I think there really would be a market for it. I think if somebody's job was to look for it, that would be a wonderful way to experience the world too. To have to go through the world saying my job is to try and find the good, like rather than I feel badly for journalists who are saying even if they're in a particular beat that doesn't seem to be violent or disturbing in that way, but let's say your beat was finance. In the last year, you're going, okay, here's, Theranos, and here's, Sam Bankman-Fried, and, so it's criminals and trials and, people being ripped off instead of, hey, here's a company that's doing something good. Like that would be a nice story,
Yeah. I have a friend I walk dogs with, who's we always when Megabucks was up in the billions of dollars, he was telling me what he would do if he won the money. And his plan was he would just wander the world looking for people doing good things and give them a bunch of money. And recently he has told me he thinks if he wins Megabucks, he's going to die rich because he's having a hard time finding people doing good things. I think, I mean, as a card carrying cynic and a jaded pessimist, I get that, but I know they're out there. I see them every day. The world is full of great people doing great things. It just gets harder to see them because we've forgotten how to look for them.
Yeah.
And as I get older, and it will be no surprise to the people watching this show, whereas the people listening might not realize how old I am until they listen, and I make it painfully obvious that I'm an old, cranky man. I have increasingly decided that every day you have an opportunity to make somebody's life better or somebody's life worse. And it might be in a big way, it might be in a small way. It might just be how friendly you are to the cashier at the grocery store or the drugstore or wherever. It might be passing somebody on a sidewalk. It seems like when you stop and try and make those interactions better, even though they're small, you feel better. And that's infectious. You can, I mean, I'm not a self-help person. I'm not even sure what the word is. I increasingly feel that just taking those small opportunities make me feel better at the end of the day. And that is maybe how I counteract all the bad things I get watching the news, is just very locally, very micro, just try and I can't change the whole world, but I can change lives in small ways, even if it's just for a few minutes. And that's something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our attention economy right now is, focused on rewarding, with clout, things that get a lot of attention. And those little small acts of kindness will not get you that. Somebody is not going to say, I caught you on my phone doing something kind and the video went viral. And so we have to change our kind of motivational structure to say, I am doing this because, like you said, this enriches my life. This enriches the life of the person to whom with whom I'm having this very small interaction,
Yeah.
and I'm not getting attention for it, and that's okay. Like, that doesn't, because
Yeah.
you could say something really horrific to that person and somebody could film it, and next thing you know, that is your life and your identity, and that is, I mean, that gets a lot of attention when people are awful to each other. And I think the more we've shifted to the attention economy, people are behaving in ways they wouldn't have otherwise to try and get that. And it is not healthy, whereas kindness is going to be something that rewards you internally. And that's,
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's true.
uh,
And when you have a negative interaction with somebody, even a small one, it sticks with you.
yeah.
You stew on it, and it's a gift to have to be able to give somebody the time to not do that, to have positive interaction that somebody's going to go home and not stew over.
Yeah, and
Small gift, but
it's going to be small and private between the two of you, and that's enough. And
yeah,
to not go, and I need more from that than the fact that we had that positive interaction. Like,
yeah,
to leave it at that is challenging, in a world where it's, so often it's, I need attention, or nobody paid me for this. Nobody paid me
yeah,
to be
yeah.
kind to you for a second. Yeah, no, that it was satisfying in and of itself. But yeah, I think there's a lot of competing pressure to take away from that. And we have to decide that is going to be important enough to me to invest even a small amount of energy in looking for those opportunities to have those connections.
Yeah. It's got to spread too, right?
Yeah. So, which now there's another idea of yours when it comes to hobbies that I think kind of actually connects in a way to what we've been talking about as far as getting away and leaving some of that anxiety of the news world behind. So, what's another thing that you get into when you're not writing?
So,
I'm thinking specifically of the fact that
yeah,
you actually
I'm
build
trying to think how
books.
to come at this, because often when you give a book talk, or you do an interview, people will ask you about your process for writing and about your writer's block. For me, sitting down at my desk and writing is the smallest part of actually writing. I don't really believe in writer's block for me, because I am writing in my head when I'm walking the dog, when I'm doing the dishes, when I'm showering, when I'm building something with my hands, any number of things, so that when I sit down at my keyboard in the morning, I already know what I'm going to do. I already know why I'm there. And part of that is that I just have limited time for it, and I need to be economical with that time and not waste it, because I always feel bad if I do waste it. But also because I don't think I think well when I'm sitting at a screen. I think better when I'm out in the world. There's no place I'd rather be than out on a boat, out on the water. Uh, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be walking in the woods with my dog. It can be spending time someplace nice with my wife. There's always part of my brain that is thinking about writing, because that's how fiction works. You're taking in the real world, you're running it through the meat grinder, and you're making the sausage. And you never know where that is going to come from. So I am always doing that. And writing itself, the sitting down at the keyboard, is just a very small part of that. Uh, but I don't think that's, well, you tell me, let me flip it around. Is that true for you? Or do you sit down at a keyboard with no plan and think, I know I need to get from here to here, I'm now going to figure out how to get there.
No, I'm like you. I'm thinking about, these characters, their voices, what is it that's going to happen to them before I sit down at the computer? And the best writing time is when I am not planning, thinking, when I get into enough of a flow state that I don't, it feels very much like it's coming to me. I
Mm,
completely understand why, artists have this notion of the muse. Like if I can get into flow state where I'm like, and I am, as I'm writing, I'm going, oh, that's interesting. Oh, really? That's what she says? Like it, like where I am as surprised as the reader, that's the ideal. So sometimes it's not all planned out in that thought process
yeah.
beforehand, but it's not the kind of slog of, and then what does the person say next? I don't want, I want to be as in the moment with the reader as possible. But yeah, a lot of that is happening while I'm gardening, while I'm walking the dogs, while I'm, I think those are really healthy times to go, okay, this is where the story can percolate.
Are you a seat of the pantser or are you a planner when it comes to
So
writing?
I have become a very much a hybrid writer over the course of my career. I used to be very much a pantser, and like many pantsers, I did not revise and edit enough afterwards.
Hmm.
I would say, okay, well, I got to the end of the draft and I'm done, and then it was not. And so, one of the things that I tell students is it is fine to be a pantser or a planner, but if you are a pantser, remember it takes just as much time. The
Yeah.
planners do a lot of time at the beginning, and the pantsers need to do a lot of revision and editing afterwards. But now what I found is I've developed some kind of techniques for planning, and I often employ them in the middle. So when
Hmm.
I get stuck and I'm going, oh no, I'm getting bored with this story, rather than giving up on it, okay, now, I tend to write stories out of order. I always tell my students, no one knows what order you wrote it in. And so when I get to the middle and I'm going, I don't know what happens, next. Okay, well then I write the ending. And then okay, that may be helpful. And I do some character outlining and I do some setting description stuff and lots of note taking in the middle. And then okay, how do I go back and update and how do I discover that I started the story in the wrong place? That
Yeah.
isn't, chapter one is not chapter one anymore. But that tends to be part of it for me. And so yeah, when I get into that planning place, it is more systematic. Whereas when I'm in that, the pantser phase at the beginning, often it is that just kind of daydreamy, what's going to happen next in this, and it's just fun and kind of open and light.
Yeah, when I sit at my desk, it's the same desk that I pay bills at.
Hmm.
It's the same desk that I send emails from, that I work a day job at. And it's really easy to fall down any of those rabbit holes. Uh, when I am writing, I hate to call it writing, it's actually just thinking, but when I am like out of my boat, for example, or out in the woods, I don't have those temptations. And I feel like I think better
Yeah.
about the story. And even though I might forget details of the story and it might take me in a completely different place, I think that's good. I think that's necessary. Uh, I am a pantser, very much so. Often I will know like I need to get from this point to this point, but I have no idea what path it's going to take me to get there. And often the draft that I write is not the ultimate path I take. I am a very big reviser. I think the novel before Ordinary Bear, Small Animals Caught in Traps, I think I finished the first draft in, it was like 2016, and I finished the draft that we sold in 2022. That was a lot of drafts in between that. At one point, it got up to like 450,000
Oh
words,
gosh.
and it ended up being like a 70,000 word novel. I just, it was not an efficient way to write a book, but I misunderstood the book, and that's okay too. It's okay to delete it all and start over again, which is what I did. I knew the story I wanted to tell. It just didn't look like I wanted it to look. And I'm going to paraphrase him horribly here, but James Michener said something like, "I'm an okay writer. I'm a great rewriter." That's how I feel my first drafts are terrible, but I really feel like it's important to get a first draft on the page and then spend all the time in the world revising it. That is very much my process. And often that does not look like sitting at a desk revising. Often it looks like I'm out staring at water,
Yeah.
thinking about, does this make sense for this character to act this way? Is this how people would respond to this situation? What am I forgetting? Like, can I just sink myself into this scene from this character's perspective? And what would I see? What would I smell? How would I react? What am I missing here? And when you're sitting at your desk, sometimes you feel compelled to put more words on the page and you rush to the next thing. So I sometimes procrastination and distracting yourself from writing is actually the best thing you can do for your writing.
I mean, often it is an essential part of the process, and giving ourselves the grace to do it, to not feel
Yeah.
like, oh, I have failed today because all I did was think. No, you thought, and that is absolutely essential. And I don't want your book that was where you never thought. So take
Yeah.
the time. You know?
Yeah, I often see people talking about works in progress and their word count, and that's important, but it is not the critical metric. Sometimes if you only find 50 words in a day, but they're the 50 words you've been looking for 6 months, that is a great day. And you have done something far more valuable for your book than the day where you put 5,000 words on the page.
Well, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask you. So many years ago, I wrote an essay. I heard an interview with Oprah Winfrey, and she was describing a book that she had written as her baby. And I just resented this metaphor. I was like, no, writing a book is not like having a child, especially for men. We're only involved in the producing of the child for, depending on how well we're doing, maybe an hour. And then, that is not what writing a book is like. And so I wrote this essay about how writing a novel was like building a boat in your backyard.
Hmm.
And it's very difficult to say to people, I'm building a boat in my backyard without sounding like a lunatic. And you've actually built boats. So what do you think of this metaphor for, building a ship is, and how do those connect for you, building a boat and building a book?
I have used that analogy many times myself because I think it is very apt. And during the pandemic, the first year when everybody was really isolated and in lockdown, somebody had given me an old, like 1930s, I think, three-seated rowing. It looked like a whaling boat. It wasn't. It was built in Minnesota, but it was lapstrake wood. It needed to be restored. And I actually didn't write for like 4 months. I just worked on this boat, and it felt like I was writing the whole time because even though I was working with my hands and my brain was kind of shut off or engaged differently, it kind of worked the same mental muscles and it felt like the same process as revision for me. Uh, as part of my first book, it's a long story, but I built a boat as part of that book. It was the epilogue of the book, and that was the name of the boat that I built. And that was when I first realized that your analogy is absolutely correct. You make decisions through every step of the process. You have a plan, but things don't always follow the plan accordingly. And there's a lot of room. Building a boat is science, right? Because it needs to float, it needs to follow specs, but there's a lot of room for art in there as well. And they say that a wooden boat is the most beautiful thing that humans can make, maybe other than other humans. But and they say it's hard to build an ugly boat. I like to think that I disproved that. I was not a great boat builder, um, and it takes work and time and patience and revision, and that is all true of writing. Uh, Often early in their career, writers, let's say, feel like the idea that comes to them that comes out on the page is the idea, and they don't want to mess with it. And you have to get past that. You absolutely have to get past that. And that is, I think, probably a big part of boat building for me is at any stage of the process, you're making choices, uh, and it doesn't always look like you think it's going to look. And you're not quite sure how you're going to get where you're going to get. And you're learning things as you go. And you have to not be afraid to break things and fix things. And really, the only way to succeed at it is to build up the skills so that you know that when you break something, you can fix it or you can figure out a solution for it. That's what writing is, right? It's just building up confidence that you can write yourself into a corner and figure out a way out of it. Uh, you have to learn all the tools. You have to learn how to use them. You have to learn which tools to use at which time for which task. And you need to be willing to put in the time. And you're going to get calluses and you're going to inhale sawdust, metaphorically, of course. And that's all important. But then when that thing is out on the water, there is nothing more beautiful, and it can take you places that nothing else can. And that is just like a book for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it can sink. I mean, you
Or-
can write a book.
Have you read my have you read my books?
It's not out yet, so I guarantee I'm not referencing your book. But I mean, you can write a book. I mean, in that revision process for small animals, where you go, this is not seaworthy. This I need to actually go through and do some massive revisions because this is not what I want it to be yet. And that's a I to extend the metaphor, I can imagine that being just heartbreaking when you're building a boat and you realize this is not gonna be seaworthy. What do I need to do to kind of start this project over to make sure this is a viable boat? And I agree with you. I think that new authors are often building rafts and they say, okay, I can throw this thing on the water and it will float. Yeah, but
I think the rush to get it on the water is an important part of the analogy here, because you're not just building something, you're not just trying to build a life raft to save yourself. It's not the bare minimum that will float. You want to build something beautiful. You want to build something that people will marvel at. You want to build something that is going to last a long time. And that's hard. It's hard to not rush through that. I get that. I absolutely get that. And often I feel like being successful at writing is mostly showing up every day and sticking with it, because there are a million reasons not to. There are a million reasons to rush. There are a million reasons to quit. There are a million reasons to do something else, to get up. Maybe I'll be smarter if I'm in the kitchen having coffee than I am here. There are a million reasons to buckle under the weight of the rejection, the inevitable weight of the inevitable rejection. Sometimes I feel like the only way to succeed at writing is to just be the guy who sticks that out, or be the person who sticks that out. And that's hard. That is really, really hard.
Well, and when we were talking about the stepping away from the project part, there are elements of boat building too, where you need to paint that next layer of lacquer and then not touch it and let that dry. And that is hard for new writers, where they just need to step away. You can't throw that thing in water while the lacquer's still wet. You can't, go on to the next coat of paint while the lacquer's still wet. You've got to let it dry first. And that's hard too, to step away from the project and let it, cure.
I mean, we could extend the metaphor all day. There's wood is, straight and boats are curved, and figuring out how to curve that wood. You come to that moment in every story you write. You have a 2x4 and you need to figure out how to bend it and not snap it. And I like that metaphor. I like it not just because it's one that I used myself, but because it holds up under scrutiny.
Yeah. So we're going to go to our break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you specifically, now that we've talked about daydreaming, what have you been daydreaming about lately? Special announcement time. NotAPipe Publishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, the show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone. 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60-second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run 1 or 2 of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
Hello, my name is Fred Gambino. I've worked in the story industry for 4 decades as a film and game concept artist and a book cover artist. My love of story has led me to write my debut novel, Dark Shepherd, to be published by Newcom Press in May 2024. A fast-paced science fiction action thriller, it opens on the beach, where starships are crashed from orbit in order to break them up. Breela's in charge of several giant dismantling machines, and her job is to further take apart the shattered ships. Semi-freelance, she is one of many teams who work the beach, making money on the load she collects and sends to central processing. But the beach is a difficult place. Subject to misogyny and racism, she is unjustly fired, setting off a sequence of events that leads to her fleeing across the galaxy in the company of a ragtag group of misfits, pursued by agents of the ruthless and politically powerful Church of Second Light for a secret she didn't know she possessed. Only Breel can locate a mysterious rip, a wormhole that will leave humanity vulnerable to an ancient enemy, and only she stands a chance of closing it. Available for pre-order now at www.newcompress.co.uk.
An Accidental Hero, a mostly true Wombat story by Laura Rediker and Debbie Palin, is based on events during the aftermath of the Australian bushfires in 2020. Rescuers discovered animals sheltering in wombat burrows. Wombats were praised for providing a safe refuge underground. While they didn't invite other wildlife into their homes, they did truly become accidental heroes. The book is written as a newscast, with Koala and Emu at the news desk. Field reporter Kangaroo introduces readers to Wombat and her new friends. An Accidental Hero, a mostly true Wombat story by Laura Rediker and Debbie Palin. A STEM picture book published by iFrig Publishing, available at ifrigpublishing.com or wherever books are sold. For more about the author, go to lauraredikerbooks.com.
Welcome back, everybody. So, Chris, as you've been just, letting ideas bounce around, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
There's 2 answers to that, and they tie in together. So when you have a book coming out, you daydream about your book finding an audience and having success. But there are a lot of marketing and promotion decisions that go into that. And you are often thinking about how do you want your readers to see you? How do you want to portray yourself? I don't mean like falsely. I mean, what aspects of yourself do you want to highlight? What's going to represent who wrote the book? How are you going to get your readers to trust you? So the second part of this answer that I've been daydreaming about is the greatest author photo of all time. Danish explorer Peter Freuchen, and I'm probably mispronouncing his name, and his wife Dagmar. He was a Danish explorer who coincided time-wise with one of my ancestors that I wrote about in my first book, Chasing Alaska, which is how I first discovered this photo. And Freuchen he spent a lot of time up in the Arctic and like Finland area, the Sami people. And he is a giant man in this photo with his tiny, petite, beautiful little European wife. He decided to wear a fur coat. It might be a bear costume. He looks like a bear in this jacket. It is an incredible photo, and it is like Beauty and the Beast with him and his wife, and they were a great couple, and it's just the most impressive photo, and it always humbles me because you think, all right, I need an author's photo that makes me look smart, that makes me look serious, and then this guy comes along and he dresses like a friggin' bear, and it is the greatest photo of all time. I wish really I could do that. So that's what I've been daydreaming about, is that photo. And that probably inspired my bear costume today.
You should totally recreate it. What you'd have to do is stand 2 feet in front of your wife so that you look, he looks enormous.
He does look
Even
enormous.
like
Yeah.
the size of his head versus the size of her head. Doug's gonna toss that up for the folks on YouTube. You're seeing that now. He is just a enormous. I mean, this is a guy who, like, kills a bear and makes a coat out of it, and it just looks like it fits properly because
Yeah,
he
maybe too
is
small. Yeah.
he is
Yeah,
a
and
bear-sized human being.
I've read some of his books and I've read books about him. I have a bunch of them behind me here, and I mean, he was an incredible guy. A lot of these explorers were the conditions they endured, uh, the feats of strength and endurance they put themselves through. Really humbling when, for a guy who complains that man, I wrote for 2 hours today. It was exhausting,
Right.
My fingers are all cramped up from typing. What these guys went through, these explorers went through, my ancestors included, is incredible. And he earned that photo. I think that's why my photo is like me sitting on a bench trying to look clever, because I just don't have the credentials to pull off a photo like that.
Yeah.
But it's easy to daydream about such
Yeah,
things.
it really is an amazing, and it is incredibly evocative too. Like, you can see them as a couple, and she is not pretending to be, oh yeah, here I'm gonna dress like you. Like, she looks completely distinct. Like, no, I'm living my life in Europe, and and you're like you said, I mean, she's gorgeous and she's dainty, and that you can see it. There's a whole story of their dynamic too. She's kind of leaning
Yeah.
towards him and he's standing. I mean, it's really wonderful. So yeah,
It
that's
really does tell a story. And I would absolutely buy any book if that was the author photo on.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, it makes me think I really need to work on my author photos.
Yeah, yeah. There's probably somebody teaching courses at writing conferences on how to create a good author photo. And if there isn't, there should be,
Yeah.
because that is a serious struggle. And there are a lot of bad ones out there. A friend and I have been sending them to each other for decades now. Like, I'm going to need your help when the day comes that I have a book out and I need to pick an author's photo. I'm going to need you to tell me I look ridiculous if I look ridiculous. And the way we've been doing that is just the shorthand of sending each other photos we like and photos we don't like. Oh, this is an interesting choice. We won't call anybody's photo bad because it's hard,
Right.
but we will definitely call people out on the interesting choices they make. I wish I had the courage to choose to dress like Peter Freuchen in my
I
author photo.
One piece of advice I have heard, and this is more from a marketing perspective, is if you feel comfortable, and it is kind of a terrifying thing to do, put multiple online and do A/B testing and
Hmm.
let people tell you, of those two, it's this one, of those two, it's this one, and kind of do bracketology until you get to the one where, but you have to endure the horror of,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
a bunch of strangers commenting on your appearance. But it is a great way to create some kind of engagement and create some
yeah,
sense
that's true.
of, the reader's ownership of your image in that way. But yeah, I mean, I can think of some of the best ones I've ever seen are like cartoonists. Some really funny ones where they're comfortable just going, yeah, I look silly. I'm doing this thing that is there was it Christopher Moore who is a
Oh
humorist,
yeah, yeah.
a writer,
Practical
has some
Demon
great
Keeping.
ones.
Is that
Um,
him?
but it was the guy who did Bloomsbury. What was his name?
Oh, yeah. I'm. It's
Yeah,
gonna pop. It's
folks
gonna
who
come to
are,
me later. Yeah,
there's a bunch of people yelling at their car radio right now because they
yeah.
know exactly what I'm talking about. I think he had one where he was standing holding a leash, and the image was of a rhinoceros. And so I don't know if there was some early Photoshop going on there or if he was actually holding a rhinoceros by the leash, but it was like, that's brave, and it was a great picture.
You
Uh,
know, my editor reached out to me about 6 months ago when they were putting together the hardcover of Ordinary Bear, and she said, "I'm assuming we're using the same author photo as Small Animals." And I said, "No, I want to use this one." And I was totally joking. I sent her a picture. We had gone to the Oregon Zoo, and we had bought elephant hats for our nieces. And I had on the elephant hat with the big ears and the long trunk, and I was drinking out of like a 40-ounce beer. And I sent it to her as a joke. She's like, "Oh, this is great. This is a fun photo." And she was serious.
yep.
And it again, I didn't have the guts to go with that photo, but it also made me think that she knows something that I don't know. People don't necessarily want the authorly looking photo. Yeah,
That black and white looking very serious, right? Yeah,
yeah,
no, I
right.
mean, people want to
The
know.
elbow patches, they
Yes.
want to connect with the author. They want to find the person relatable. And I guess I need to learn that lesson, and I haven't yet.
Yeah, but it's also, how vulnerable do I want to make myself? Like,
Yeah.
and if I did something that was superposed like that, it would just look ludicrous. Like I am
Yeah.
not that, Danish.
Well, here's the thing. So I invested in this bear costume for this podcast today. Maybe I can use this for my next book's author photo, or at least some of
Yes,
the
or at
publicity
least
photos for.
folks who are listening right now, by all means comment and encourage. Yes, more bear costume pictures. The way they word that will have to be careful. They don't want to be like I want you to be more of a bear. That has a different meaning.
Yeah.
So
That's a different
excellent.
book. Yep.
Yeah, that's a different book. Um, so in addition to the book, is there anything career-wise that you want readers to know that's happening career-wise now? I mean, that's kind of all encompassing at this point, I'll bet.
Yeah, that is my singular point of focus at this point is it's a terrifying moment where the book goes from existing first solely in your mind to being a shared vision with your publisher, your editor, your agent, your small circle of readers, to suddenly becoming a thing that people are going to talk about and write about and critique and read. And it is a moment of hope, terrifying hope,
Yeah.
but hope. So this is my focus at the moment. That is the only thing I am thinking about, other than Peter Freuchen in his bear costume, and Irish literature. And that is the thing that I would hope your audience would help me think about as well, because I could use the positivity.
Well, and where can they find it? Where can they find out more about you as well? What's going to be a
Yeah,
good
you
place?
can. Anybody who wants to learn more about me or my work can find me at cbbernard.com. I spend less time on Twitter and BlueSky than I used to, and more time than I should. But you can find me at both those sites, as well as on Instagram at CB Barnyard, which was a childhood nickname. Uh, and you can find the book anywhere fine books are sold. It's available for pre-order, although it is available on Amazon. My recommendation, my preference is you find a good local independent bookseller and ask them to carry it, or buy it through like IndieBound or bookshop.org, or any
Bookshop.org.
independent bookstore. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of bookshop.org. Support your local bookstore. Local bookstores play such an important role in our kind of book ecosystem, and we will miss them when they're gone.
Yeah,
Because
they
you
not
don't
just
always
book
know what you'll
ecosystem, but communities as well, right?
Yeah. So bookshop, if you don't know your local bookstore, support them anyway through bookshop.org when you go to buy that book that you already know about. And speaking of which, what is something, and I don't want to take anybody away from your book, but when they've finished your book, what's something else you're looking forward to reading that they should check out?
Something I'm looking forward to reading. Well, eventually I have to assume I will finish the to be read pile of Irish literature that I've been working my way down. I currently am very fortunate to have several manuscripts from friends for forthcoming books. And it's a gift for somebody to trust you to read something that they have written before it has made its way out into the world. So I won't call any of them out by mentioning their names here, but I think that is my next to be read pile. At any given moment, I have a bunch of books that I need to read because I want to, or because I feel like I'm missing out by not. And while it would be easy to feel like an obligation when people ask you to read their books, it's a gift. It's a gift for somebody to trust you with that. So that's what I'm looking forward to reading, is the books that people have entrusted me with before they've made their way out into the world.
Yeah, yeah. And if listeners, if somebody asks you, there's a two-parter, I would say, if somebody asks you to read an entire manuscript that they have crafted and they are ready for to go out into the world, yes, I totally agree. It is a gift. One thing I did have to learn, though, as somebody was seeking beta readers kind of early in my career, don't give somebody something that is incomplete, because
Oh yeah.
if you don't finish it and they have invested the time, and then you say, you know what, after I handed that thing off to you, I realized it's not going to work. They are burned, and you will not get them to read something in the future. So if somebody tries to hand you something that is half finished, tell them I'll wait till it's done.
Well,
And then yeah,
that's an interesting point, right? It's like, they say some bells can't be unrung, uh, some things can't be unseen. Once somebody, I feel like you get one shot to surprise readers, and there are some readers, like editors, are very good at this. They can read the same book 8 times as you make revisions and still recognize the story thread in it and not overlook things or not forget things. But most people don't think that way. So if you do have trusted readers, you get one shot with them, and you need to get it right. You need to give them the best possible version of it. But do we have a second? Can I ask you
oh
a
yeah, go
question?
for it.
When you are working on a book, a manuscript, do you tell people about it, or do you just let it exist in your head and nowhere else?
As little as possible. So, I'll, engaging with other authors, I'll say, oh yeah, I'm currently working on, the third book in my paranormal trilogy. And that's about it. Or sometimes I'll tease a little, the second one. I remember when I came across the idea of having baby, adorable, deadly baby werewolves. That was something where I was like, let's tease that. Like that's fun. But I had an experience with this last one where I was sitting on my couch just kind of in a daze when my partner got home from work, and she was like looking at me like, what's going on? And I said, I wrote an absolutely heart-wrenching death scene today. And she was like, who did you kill? Who, because this is book two. And I said, I can't tell you, that would be a spoiler. And so I had just totally, like baited the hook. And then she was like, well, I just need to make something clear. If it's this character or this character, we're through. You cannot kill them off. And so I was like, I can't tell. I'm sorry. You're going to have to read it when it's done. But yeah, I really do try and keep it kind of protected, because I've had that experience of failing at that, and then having somebody say, you roped me into caring about this story, and then the story didn't exist, or that element of the story didn't exist. And
Yeah.
so, and I agree, we want to make sure we are honoring people's time. My readers' time is what they're giving me, and I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I am doing my absolute damnedest to make it worth their while.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I think ideas are like flames, right? You get a spark and you have to protect it from the wind. Uh, it'll go out. And if I'm always afraid that if I share the idea before it is fully formed, I'm going to lose it. Because somebody might say something, oh, that's a good idea. And then you're like, oh, did they mean that's a good idea? Or do they mean that's a good idea? Were they being
Yes.
polite? And once somebody gets into your head like that, you're done.
Yeah.
So I need to just, my process is, once I start working on something, I don't even tell my wife about it. She just knows I disappear into my office and I work. And she is very respectful about that. And even though it drives her nuts, but I just need to have confidence in my ability to write it, and to know that, okay, this is going to be good. It may not work, but I'm not going to second guess it until I am at the point where I'm ready to get somebody else to weigh in on it.
Yeah.
And that's hard. It's hard to build up that kind of faith.
Yeah, but I think some of it is that kind of, when we're in the writing process, I have these pajamas that look like a suit of armor, and that's what I'll wear when I receive my edits and I go through my edits. Is, okay, I need to get my armor on, because
Oh, that's such a great idea.
gonna be rough. But like I can't, during the drafting part. I can't. I couldn't take feedback during that. Because if somebody said, I don't think this idea is working, it would just derail the entire process.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
look,
there's no input until the draft is done, and then
yeah, you got to let other writers, readers, critics, reviewers, agents, publishers, editors, you got to let them into your life, but never let them into your head.
yeah,
And once I mean, if you start thinking, well, what's my mom going to read? What's my mom going to think when she reads this? Or, how is this going to go over? You can't be concerned with that when you're writing. That's something you deal with later. You need to write the truest, most honest, most terrifying thing you can think. Uh, and I mean, you can scale it back later, you can revise it later,
Right.
but at that first stage, you need to, like Hemingway said, you just need to bleed onto the page, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, it is okay to be afraid of the fact that somebody's going to be seeing it later, but
Oh
that's
yeah,
not
yeah, and you should, yeah,
right now. Right now you're creating that thing, and later I tell students the hardest moment is clicking send. Like,
yeah,
like when I have had those moments where I'm just like over the mouse going, okay, it's the query letter is written, the submission is there, and no, I need to take a break. I just can't push
yeah,
that button.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
now send. Like but yeah, that's in the creation part of the process, I could not deal with that kind of paralysis. So no
yeah,
feedback there.
yeah. And it's bad. I think it's bad for the work itself.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
although I have friends, I have had this argument with friends for years and years and years. I have friends who, as soon as they have an idea, they'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying to me.
Yeah. Well, and I have friends
Absolutely
who are in
terrifying to me.
critique groups where that their group is an integral part of, they're sharing every chapter. And
Yeah.
that's just not my process.
Yeah.
That chapter that I would offer someone may not exist in the book later. I'm not going to
Yeah.
give that to anybody. It's in its infancy at that point. But
Yeah.
if people have got the group that works for them and that's part of their process, I'm a bit jealous.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
haven't found that.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail the conversation.
No, that's exactly that I think that's exactly what I want to, have the readers hear is this is the way we work is interesting in and of itself, especially, I don't want to get too processy, but when it bubbles over, that's good. Like that's,
Yeah.
we can't escape thinking about some of these things. Now, I did want to ask you about if you had a controversial opinion that, and this is to kind of spoof that whole attention economy thing. If you were to go out there and throw out an idea just to create, stir the pot and create clout, what would be your horribly offensive opinion?
All right. So you mentioned Donnie Darko. So I'm gonna summon Jake Gyllenhaal here. They are remaking the movie Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal, and my controversial opinion is that that is completely unnecessary because the original Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze was the perfect movie, and there's no need to remake it.
And I half agree with you. I don't think
Half.
there's a need to remake it either.
I actually watched
Excellent.
it. I was up late this weekend, and Roadhouse was on, and I watched about 20 minutes of it, and I think I agree with you. It is definitely not the perfect movie that I remember it from.
I was wondering, does it hold up? Like, but the other thing is, you see a film that's from that era, and sometimes there's like horribly offensive stuff that we didn't realize was horribly offensive, so maybe I should go back and watch it and just be like so pleased that there's not the,
Yeah.
horrendous sexism or like, homophobia or whatever that we just tolerated in that time. We were just like, oh, that's fine. That's toxic masculinity. To be manly is to treat other people in this way, but so maybe it's one of the ones that holds up better than I think, but
It doesn't. But for me, I'm gonna say that it's more about I just get tired of them recycling
yeah.
ideas.
There's
I mean,
so much
they're
good
making the
stuff
Fall Guy
being
now with
created by
Ryan
writers
Gosling.
right now. Do we need to
Yeah,
go back? Yeah. But I think it goes back to that same idea of they're trying to keep the lights on. Like they need a sure bet, and it constrains them from doing things that are more interesting and experimental because
yeah,
they're not willing to take risks, and so that's remakes and sequels forever.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, you can almost use how many Incredible Hulk actors there have been to determine people's age. Like I'm six
yes,
Incredible Hulks old.
Yes, yes.
Spider-Man, they introduced the multiverse, and that kind of messed with that. But you could also do that with how many Peter Parkers had
Yeah.
been around in your lifetime
I,
before.
I thought Eric Bana was a very good Hulk. I'm fine with, yeah, that you're right. It
But he
date,
wasn't. He was what, the third, the fourth?
yeah, yeah. There's that yeah, well, I know we are old enough for Lou Ferrigno. Remember the Lou Ferrigno. That show scared me as a kid. I was young
Yeah.
enough that it was like, this is kind of terrifying. Like this is, like, and I wonder if there are kids watching now who are like, the idea of somebody just hulking out and it is kind of frightening. But yeah, that for me that was Lou Ferrigno. I was scarred by Lou Ferrigno, who apparently is the sweetest man in real life. Like it's just the
Yeah.
nicest guy,
Yeah.
but terrified me as a child. So there's some folks I got to thank before we sign off here. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for the intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3Ds. And thanks to Halisna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and would like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email that to me. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making the show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. And I cannot forget to mention, Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing, so please go to NotAPipePublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it. Please check out Chris's brand new book, which it's Ordinary Bear. Ordinary Bear.
Ordinary Bear.
Say it enough times that you're going to be like, sitting at home going, why I just need to get a copy of Ordinary Bear. Yes, we said the title 10 times. Go buy your copy of Ordinary Bear. And then do Chris a favor and tell a friend about it. Click on that 5th star, write that brief review. It makes a huge difference to authors. So make Chris's day. Please review Ordinary Bear when you finish it. And same thing for this show. Click on that little thumbs up thing an odd number of times, or on your podcast player. And if you write a comment and it's fun and funny, we will read it on the show. So that would be a way that you could contribute as well. So Chris and I have some things we want you to remember going into your week. Chris, what's your advice for everybody as they enter into their week?
I just want people to remember that if it can't be fixed with Advil, duct tape, or whiskey, it can't be fixed.
Yeah, that's solid. Which combined with our conversation about building boats, is duct tape particularly seaworthy?
I wish I could. When I was building the boat, some people didn't have faith in my ability to build boats, mostly family members, and they recommended that the stuff they have a TV infomercial on that looks like duct tape and it's seals waterproof cracks. A lot of people donated some of that to the cause. They had very little faith in my ability to build my first boat.
Nice, but the boat held without the tape.
As far as you know, Ben.
Yes, as far as I know. Yes, you're here, so it worked. That's all anybody knows. Well, I just want to remind listeners, a book without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too. So don't ignore the spaces. And third, no matter how much you procrastinate, we're still proud of you.